समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Hi, and welcome to the Print Security Code. As you may have seen, there have been intense clashes between members of the Tehreek Labbaik-e-Pakistan, a far-right religious group, and police forces and the army in Muridke, quite close to Lahore. It's been very underreported, but it breaks a long pattern of cooperation between the TLP and the military, and I'm going to try and unpack what the story is all about. Less than an hour before it began, William Butcher had been lunching on a hot dog by the poolside in the congenial environment of the American Embassy's club in Islamabad, nestled in a nice 32-acre campus. Now, suddenly, he was being held hostage in the concrete dormitories of the Quaid-e-Azam University, facing trials by a youth court for crimes against the Islamic movement. The students who had attacked the embassy had not only kidnapped him, they'd thrown a brick at Butcher's face, then hit him on the back of the head with a pipe. And a young government accountant had been relieved of his wallet and 2 rings by the mob. "Kill the Americans," the crowd sang. 20 kilometers away that day in the garrison town of Rawalpindi, military ruler General Muhammad Ziaul Haq was being showered with rose petals by women who had been strategically positioned along the route of his open jeep ride. Everywhere he stopped, his staff handed out sacks of flour, quilts, and copies of the Quran. Lieutenant General Faiz Ali Chishti, one of the executors of the coup that had brought General Zia to power, watched as his chief addressed the crowds at Waris Khan Chowk. Someone asked a question about the storming of the Masjid al-Haram at Mecca, the most sacred site in Islam, the previous night. Either intentionally or otherwise, General Chishti later wrote, Zia replied, the Americans had inspired the attack on the Holy Kaaba. This was completely untrue, as you'll have seen in a past episode of Security Code if you're a regular viewer. The Masjid al-Haram had in fact been occupied by Saudi rebels. Zia, however, fueled rumors which were circulating about American involvement. And as Zia's soldiers watched, the American flag at the embassy was brought down and burned. An American military guard was shot in the head and tragically died. Last week, Field Marshal Asim Munir did what General Zia wouldn't. His troops chased down and shot fleeing protesters of the far-right Tehreek Labbaik-e-Pakistan party, sometimes at point-blank range, after they marched on the American embassy to protest the Gaza peace plan. Figures like Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's son-in-law, Muhammad Safdar Awan, have openly backed TLP causes like the persecution of the Ahmadiyya minority and the murder of purported blasphemers like Punjab Governor Salman Taseer. Now, the PMLN is pushing for the TLP to be banned. So what's happened? Field Marshal Asim, just like Zia, has recruited political Islam to his cause. But where Zia wheedled, inveigled and bought out the clerics, the Field Marshal is trying to keep them under his jackboot. The decision to crush or at least hit the TLP marks a remarkable turn in Pakistani politics that hasn't been studied enough. 2 years ago, just months after then only General Asim's term as chief began, Tehreek-e-Taliban attacks began to surge, marking the unraveling of the Pakistan Army's long alliance with Afghanistan-based jihadists. To make things worse, Asim's efforts to stamp out support for former Prime Minister Imran Khan were flailing. Though the government succeeded in incarcerating Imran after much drama, widespread violence demonstrated a new willingness among the public to take on the armed forces on the streets. Faced with a protest march by the TLP clerics 2 years ago in this circumstance, Now Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's government agreed to set up a counter-blasphemy department, issue a diplomatic letter to demand the release of arrested terrorist Afia Siddiqui, and reduce fuel prices, endangering the economy. Ever since 9/11, the TLP had been cultivated by the generals as a bulwark against revolutionary Islamist organizations like Al-Qaeda, which sought to overthrow the existing political order and the state. General Pervez Musharraf, who you'll remember was then Pakistan's military ruler, saw clerics of the Barelvi order as tools of his policy which he called enlightened moderation. In essence, that meant an accommodation between the clerics, between the army and America. The clerics of the Ahle Sunnat, as the Barelvis are properly known, represented deeply illiberal values mired in misogyny and intolerance of religious minorities. Their pietist conservatism, though, was also ideologically opposed to the anti-state radicalism inspired by the 18th century mystic Sayyid Ahmad of Rai Bareli. Sayyid Ahmad's thoughts have informed jihadism across the Indian subcontinent. In essence, General Musharraf was offering the Ahle Sunnah clerics a clean deal. In return for opposing jihadism, they could have an outsized share of state patronage and power. Even as Barelvi seminaries harvested massive counter-extremism funding generously given by America, a Barelvi cleric was appointed Federal Minister for Religious Affairs, and 6 more clerics were appointed to the Council of Islamic Ideology, which is responsible for making law consonant with faith. Things didn't quite run to Musharraf's script though. The Barelvi cleric Pir Afzal Qadri soon built up a massive following around his campaign to eradicate the Ahmadiyya and purported blasphemers. The assassination of Governor Tasir in 2011 because of his opposition to the misuse of the blasphemy laws demonstrated the threat. The political order buckled under though. The grave of Tasir's assassin, by his own bodyguard, emerged as a popular shrine which drew thousands every day. Late in 2018, when Pakistan's Supreme Court acquitted Asia Noreen, a Christian wrongly accused of blasphemy, TLP leader Afzal Qadri declared the judges wajibul qatl, or deserving of being murdered. The law of God held that the Prime Minister and the generals were also accountable, he insisted. I quote, "Their drivers or their security guards should kill them." The Barelvis had begun to bite the hand that fed them, but there was no one willing to risk putting a muzzle on the beast General Musharraf had unleashed. The emergence of the TLP as a threat to the Pakistani state was, of course, quite predictable. Founded in 1981, the Dawat-e-Islami, the largest of the modern Barelvi proselytizing organizations, had an obsessive pietism that governed everything from how young women should behave, to dress, to the propriety of ritual ablutions in bathrooms with an attached toilet. The Dawat-e-Islami principally served as a kind of network offering mobility to its lower middle class adherents, much like a large social organization or a caste association. From 1988 though, as religious feuds grow more intense in Pakistan, members of the Dawat-e-Islami also demonstrated a considerable talent for killing. The adherents of the group engaged in tit-for-tat assassinations of their rivals in other religious orders and killed hundreds of Shia in bombings and shootings, the scholar Sayyid Walid Nasr has recorded. The Dawat-e-Islami voiced bitter hostility to polytheists, who it warned would be cursed in the afterlife by having, I quote, "the birds tear up their flesh into small pieces, or the wind separate their body parts and throw them into a distant valley." The organization's members were implicated in blasphemy murders from France to the United Kingdom and India. Khadim Hussain Rizvi, the founder of the movement that went on to become the TLP, warned Muslims not to associate with non-Muslims or to adopt Western social norms, scholars Arslan Ahmad and Bilal Zafar Ranjha wrote. The Pakistani state once again cowered. When Khadim Hussain Rizvi passed away at Lahore's Farooq Hospital in 2020, his mourners constituted one of the largest public gatherings in Pakistan's history. Leaders of political parties attended the event, and even then Pakistan Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa took the opportunity to extend his condolences, sincere or otherwise. Politicians hoped Khadim Hussein's son and successor Saad Hussain Rizvi would prove a little more amenable to reason. The TLP was relentless though. In the winter of 2020, the party unleashed yet another round of anti-blasphemy mobilization, this time ostensibly to protest caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad published by the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo years earlier. Imran Khan's government responded by embracing elements of the TTP's core demand, a Sharia-governed nation. The flamboyant leader set up a high-level committee to promote Islam in public life, screen media for purported blasphemy, and help create what he called an Islamic welfare state. All this ran true to historical pattern. General Muhammad Ziaul Haq, as I'd mentioned, lavished funding on clerics, even though his chosen partners were the Jamaat-e-Islami. The general's clerics declared that Nizam-e-Mustafa, the political order supposedly ordained by the Prophet, demanded the centralization of power in a president with absolute power and the abolition of political parties. Zia's clerics, however, ended up burning the embassy burning of 1979, a crisis that would have precipitated a severe rupture with America had the Soviet Union not saved Zia and invaded Afghanistan the next month, making Pakistan a strategic ally. Field Marshal Muhammad Ayub Khan had, earlier in the 1960s, appointed the theologian Fazlur Rahman to head the Institute of Islamic Research, hoping to give his own modernizing policies some religious gloss. That project didn't end well. The theologian was forced into exile by religious hardliners, and just a little bit later, the hard-drinking Field Marshal himself was deposed by his generals. Now, the crackdown on the TLP shows Field Marshal Munir is trying a new path. Instead of coddling clerics, as generals did in the past, he's crushing the movements of the religious right which challenge the state's authority. This should not be confused, though, with any secular or modernizing impulse. The Field Marshal instead is basing his authority on his own religious credentials, marketing himself as a source of both spiritual and temporal authority. Like the TLP, the general himself has insisted that the project of Pakistan is irreconcilable with Hinduism. To America, Field Marshal Munir seems to offer a convenient means to crush Islamism in Pakistan and take on jihadists in Afghanistan and beyond. In reality, as the experience of the Zia and Musharraf years show, his authoritarianism and the choking of democratic institutions by the military will serve only to consolidate religious fundamentalism as the sole language of protest against the state. America imagines Asim to be the kind of authoritarian that the doctor ordered to crush the virus of jihadism. He is in fact the disease that is ravaging Pakistan. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a consulting editor with ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.